Oh,
Hello.
Hello. Hello, good morning.
Good afternoon from here in India.
Oh, that's great. You are welcome on board.
Okay. You are from?
No, I'm in the office.
Okay, okay. When are we beginning?
We are waiting
Oh, okay.
for the organizer.
Yeah, I think, the plenary, it's still going on, maybe.
I hope we are not lost. Is this our room?
I think so, yes.
Thank you.
Well, if we are lost,
Yes.
Good morning.
Yes, this is the room.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining Room 1.
Good morning.
You are being addressed by Emmanuel Letebele. I am the co-chair for Room 1 that will be looking at the question of governance and institutions in promoting inclusivity. Part of the reason why there was a bit of a delay, I wanted to give the opportunity to the chair of this room, Mrs. Zaki Mkhize, to perhaps officially open the room and lead us in terms of how the room activities will play themselves out. Zaki, I hope you are in a position to then take up that role so that we can continue with the proceedings of this room. Please give me an indication so that we can get into the room program and then introduce the respective colleagues who will be presenting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks, Letebele, Emmanuel. Yes, I had a bit of a challenge of switching from the network because I think we are about to have a load shedding, so I wanted to be sure because I'm safe. But yes, I am available. And also, if you could also probably wait a few minutes and see if everyone is joining in, and then we can start about 3 minutes so that we make sure everyone is able to access this group.
Boy.
Yes, we are alive. We were just giving a few other colleagues a few minutes to get in because some have indicated to be struggling, but we will be starting in about a minute's time. Okay, colleague, I hope everyone has able to join in. Good afternoon again. Oh, it's still morning. It's before 12. So it's still morning. Good morning again. We really have had some challenging and thought-provoking process through the presentation that we deliberating on in inclusive cities this morning. And we are now moving towards the plenary and also taking into consideration what they have presented to us. Am I audible, colleagues? First, let me check.
Very well. I can hear you.
Oh, super. So a few takeaways that I have this morning from Prof. Joseph. He gave me a food for thought. With inclusivity is not about spatial inclusivity, but we need to also invest in issues around the social inclusivity a lot. And on the slide that he showed, he reminded me of the areas in the townships where in the previous design we had houses where they did not have an access or motor access to their homes. And through the new integrated development plan that we have in South Africa, we're able to start in dealing with those. So that goes beyond just giving people access, but it is also giving them an inclusion and feeling welcome and be part of the neighborhood. And also on the presentation from Prof. Kuma, I was like perplexed when he was emphasizing the issue of immigration and how he had to deal with those daily. So there's a lot that we still need to think about. But with us in this plenary, we'll be dealing with the government and the institution in promoting inclusivity. With me, I have Emmanuel Letebele, who will be co-chairing. So the order of this room will be then I'll introduce the first three of the speakers, and then Letebele will take I'll introduce the first four speakers, and then we'll take Q. Sorry, can colleagues mute so that you are able to proceed? Oh my goodness.
Sorry, can I request, CZ, can you please mute? I am in the room now. Apology, I was in another room.
Thank you, Martin. So what I'll do, I'll introduce the first four, and then
My CEO, sir, you are supposed to be in room 2. You are in room 1. Yes, so you need to leave that room and go to room 2.
Okay.
I'm seeing you on the I'm seeing you on the screen. I just leave that room. I'll be on the phone with you and call the number.
Yeah. Let me see if I can adjust that. I'm sure I can.
Colleagues, if you can mute.
So
Yeah. I'm gonna quickly just.
All right. So I was saying I will be introducing the first four speakers. I'll take engagement on the questions and answers, and then my co-chair, Emmanuel, will take the rest of the presenters. The first presenter is from Louis Edwin Chigova. I hope I'm not pushing your surname, say. He will be taking us through to the remanaging local government role in promoting inclusivity, a co-production pathway for the city of Johannesburg. So I do not want to take time in the deliberations, but because I could tell that we will have a lot of discussion around these issues. So without further ado, I will call the first presenter, Louis, to take us through to the presentation. Colleague, if I may ask that we contain the questions and then we'll take them all from after the last speaker on matter, and then we'll deliberate on the questions and answers. In that order, Louis, if you can take us through to the presentation then.
Oh, thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Can I please ask Ed to mute his mic?
To mute himself.
27. That's the meeting ID. Room 1. Room 2. 982 7554 6047. The code is 407824.
Louis, you muted, just unmute, please.
Okay, colleagues, please confirm if you are able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, you can
Okay.
see it. Please proceed.
Okay, let me put it on slideshow. Trying to put my share it on slideshow. I don't know what's happening with my laptop. Yes, perfect. Okay, good morning, colleagues. My name is Luis Edwin Chigova, and it has been an interesting interesting morning or interesting 2 days to hear a lot of insights being shared by colleagues. So as I was listening, especially to the last discussion that was led by Professor Joseph Kamjanje, it was very interesting to hear him emphasizing the 4 key pillars of inclusivity, which he highlighted as accessibility, affordability, resilience, and sustainability. And as I was listening now, it made me to reflect on my presentation that I'm going to have this morning, which is reimagining local government's role in promoting inclusivity, a core production pathway for cities. Let me try to remove this. Okay, so as we have this discussion on how can we have inclusivity in our cities and local governments throughout the world, and in particular in South Africa, some of there are a number of strategies that we can be employed in order to foster inclusivity. Maybe if I can highlight to you, colleagues, that I'm coming from public governance and management, and I see a number of you are coming from urban planning, which to me is more technical. My approach would be a public governance approach. So we see, colleagues, that ensuring inclusivity is very important in cities as it addresses various dimensions which are critical in cities, such as socio-economic issues, race, gender, and cultural diversity. Ensuring inclusivity requires that barriers are overcome, and then we also do away with inequalities that hinder equal accesses to opportunity, resources, and services in cities. So it is very important, colleagues, particularly to local governments, which are very closer to the community and are responsible in promoting inclusivity. So we see that in urban areas, local governments, they play a critical role in fostering inclusivity. So the big argument here is that inclusivity is a moral obligation and a fundamental requirement for creating a sustainable and equitable societies. It aligns with commitments such as Sustainable Development 11, Aspiration 6 of the African Union's Agenda 2063, national imperatives. If you come back to South Africa, such as the 1996 Constitution of South Africa, National Development Plan. And if you are coming from Gauteng, where I am, it also aligns with aspirations such as growing Gauteng together 2030, as well as commitments that are highlighted in the city of Johannesburg, which is going to be my case study. So we see that critically, approaches to policy making and service delivery often need to account for the diverse needs and perspectives of diverse communities. With that in mind, there is a growing recognition that innovative approaches that are needed to overcome limitations in city governance processes. And we see in most of the cities, such as Johannesburg, which have been shaped by historical injustices, where the system that is in existence today has been inherently exclusionary. it is very important now to look at what are some of the approaches that can be adopted in order to build inclusive city and or inclusive city in the context of the city of Johannesburg. So co-production, colleagues, emerges as one of a suitable approach that can be used to foster inclusion. So if we look at the available literature, particularly about promoting inclusivity from a public governance point of view, we see that service delivery and policy making in local government has been for a long period of time taken top-down approaches where policies and services are developed and implemented based on the government's assessment of community needs. So in these traditional systems, we see that public officials, they design policies and provide services to citizens. On the other hand, citizens are just there to demand, use, and oftentimes evaluate the services that they get from this. But this traditional approach has its limitations, particularly in this period where there is much talk about involvement of communities that that receive services in cities. Their input has become fundamental in the service and policy making value chain, particularly in cities. So now we see a shift towards these traditional approaches to more approaches that are collaborative, network approaches, and or governance approaches. So co-production is one such approach which emerged in that shift from the traditional to collaborative approaches, which is coming up with a twofold responsibility, which include to shift state-society power relations towards the poor and to produce tangible improvements in urban living conditions for all. So the bigger question maybe to some of our colleagues is, what exactly is co-production? So we see that co-production, if you look at available literature that we have, it exposes that co-production refers to collaborative approaches to governance and service delivery, where citizens and the government work together as partners to design, deliver, evaluate policies and services. So co-production is not a new concept. Its practice dates back to years back, but literature on co-production, I think, emerges from Eliana Ostrom in the US, where it touches on community safety issues in the United States. But we also see that what is very important now is in co-production is, particularly in cities, is whereby the citizens and the different stakeholders that reside in different cities take center stage in the provision, in making decisions, in designing of different policies. So what exactly is the rationale in promoting co-production? We see, as Jocelyn Boydion in his book, New Synthesis Approaches, he argues that ignoring the contribution made by people and service users discounts a significant source of capacity and resources. I hear there's someone who's making an input. Okay. So, colleagues, we live in a world where resources are increasingly being contested. A lot of citizens are feeling excluded. And because of that, you see they have become more restive. A lot of protests, especially in South Africa, we see a lot of protests mushrooming in all cities. And most often those protests are regarding dissatisfaction in the service delivery process. But we we are also seeing calls for inclusivity permeating a lot of governance structures. I think I highlighted the Sustainable Development Goals in my introduction, the African Union's agenda, and also national, local, and national, provincial, and local imperatives, particularly in South Africa. So we see that co-production is becoming an essential and inalienable component of service delivery. You cannot have public service delivery without co-production. The paper takes a qualitative methodology, relied on two main methods in my data collection: document analysis and literature review, and I used content analysis to analyze the data. So I found a number of benefits that are brought by co-production, particularly in promoting inclusivity in cities. Some of them include enhanced community engagement, improved quality and relevance of services, strengthen social cohesion and trust, empowerment, and capacity building of communities.
I just want to confirm with you, I've seen the documents for you, if you can.
We also see that co-production stands in as an innovation that aligns with South Africa's goals of developmental local government, particularly that are aligned in the 1998 White Paper on Local Government. In that 1990 White Paper, which defines local government as local government committed to working with citizens, groups within community to find sustainable ways to meet social, economic, material needs and improve the quality of citizens. So we have a number of examples, for example, that I found in literature by Siam and Watson that captured activities relating to co-production in the provision of new housing. So we also find a number of challenges that are posed by co-production, particularly in the city of Johannesburg, where there have been coalition government and unstable government. And then what emerges from that are contestations of power, representation, issues to do with trust amongst those at government level, sometimes issues to do with trust amongst those who are responsible at government level and the communities. Also, issues to do with trust challenges permeates even in communities, different communities, sometimes amongst racial lines and different factors. Co-production means resources. If people are to participate in the delivery of sources, sometimes they need resources. So if these resources are not available, sometimes co-production becomes a challenge. When you involve communities which are coming from diverse backgrounds, there is difficulties in balancing diverse interests and perspectives. So those are some of the challenges that we are associated with co-production. But besides those challenges, we also see that citizens, they have a role to play in co-production, particularly in promoting inclusivity. Some of the roles include active participation in decision-making process, community mobilization, and organization. So in terms of in the city of Johannesburg, we see the importance of co-production, spatial planning, development, building safe cities, revamping community parks and facilities, in budgeting and fostering accountability or accountable use of public resources. So in terms of the context of co-production in the city of Johannesburg, we also zero in the issue of stakeholder engagement and partnership through the establishment of citizen participation platforms. I think the city of Johannesburg has established a number of them. There are also partnership with a number of community organizations in terms of community policing, for example, the running of community parks, Also look at the implementation of co-production initiatives where there's co-designing of policies and programs, and sometimes collaborative service delivery, where communities are fixing their potholes in certain communities, fixing their street lights, which is a part of service delivery. But what do we want to see as some of the outcomes and impact or what we are seeing of co-production? We see improved service delivery, enhanced social cohesion, empowerment and active citizenship, policy innovation and responsiveness. So colleagues, as I round up my presentation here, I would want to reflect on how adaptable is this co-production approach to other contexts, and what should be emphasized in mainstreams if co-production is to be adopted in other maybe jurisdictions outside the city of Johannesburg. If that is to happen, there's need to emphasize on contextual considerations, which has to do with cultural and social factors, politics, and the institutional landscape. Also, it is very important to tailor co-production strategies so that they at least adhere to the different local contexts. And doing that, it involves a lot of citizen engagement, a lot of capacity building, and adaptive policy designs. It also needs that these co-production strategies, if they are to foster inclusivity, they must be tailored in a way that address local community needs.
No, it's okay. It's muted.
It's very also it's also very important to learn from best practices from different jurisdictions, so that on how best can other communities, other cities are implementing co-production in order to improve or to foster inclusivity. As I conclude, colleagues, in this paper I highlighted through reimagining the role that co-production can play in promoting inclusivity, and I focused on the city of Johannesburg. I highlighted the limitations of traditional approaches to governance, and the need for more collaborative, inclusive approaches to address the diverse needs and perspective. And this is where a co-production came in. So this co-production is demonstrated by the findings on the city of Johannesburg. It shows the promising results and in promoting inclusivity and even transforming the role that local government plays in fostering inclusivity. It is very important to note that actively involving citizens in policymaking service delivery, it can help local government to better understand the diverse needs and perspectives of the communities, leading to more effective and inclusive policies and services. So it is also very important to note implementing co-production comes with its own challenges, but it's very important to emphasize that it is critical to build capacity amongst the different stakeholders, establish trust, foster effective communication so that co-production can be successful. Thank you very much, colleagues. This marks the end of my presentation. Chair.
Thank you so much, Louis, for the well presented, and what you are suggesting is a different approach toward a traditional way of how we've been doing planning, where planners do their planning and then people become the recipient of what we have planned. I can relate to what you are suggesting, because planning with the people is the way to go in order to ensure that what you are giving them as a service is relevant to them and they can relate. I do not want to deliberate much and repeat what you've already shared with us, but I think your point of building partnership with communities and fostering them to take responsibility and accountability are the key issues that you are picking up in your presentation. Thank you so much. We are now going to be moving on to India. I'm afraid there are 3 authors that have been highlighted as for this paper. So one of them will have to present, but the authors of the next paper is, they'll also forgive me if I push their name, but it's Datang Ngata Cherenji, Atanu Chata Renji, and Banisweta Patro. The paper that they're going to be presenting is titled as follows: Building the State Capacity for Participatory Slum Upgrading Through Collaborative Governance, an Experience from Odisha in India. Guys, if you can present, because I'm not too sure who between the 3 of you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be part of this conference, and I first like to thank the organizers for inviting me, because on issues of inclusion, I think India and South Africa share some of the very common problems. And first of all, I'd like to also thank Lewis for his talk, where he talked about co-production, which kind of, it's very important that building community partnerships, and it sets a kind of the backdrop for my talk. And in my talk, let me just share the screen. I will be talking about governance innovations, for building state capacity for participatory slum upgrading through a collaborative governance process, by sharing an example from the state in which we are based in, that is the state of Odisha in eastern India. So, colleagues, we know that, globally, about 1 billion people in the world are living in the slum areas, and the people in the slum areas are amongst the worst affected in the global south. And the COVID-19 pandemic particularly had been very, very severe on the livelihood of the slum dwellers who lost their jobs, and faced crisis regarding shelter. They faced health crisis due to inadequate access to water and sanitation. No, international policy documents, whether it is UN Habitat or all other policy documents, emphasize on in situ slum upgrading through participatory processes. But even though there is a policy that wants to emphasize on in situ slum upgrading, but its implementation, it's very, very challenging, particularly in most cities in the global south, in India, and many other African cities as well. There are issues of legal challenges, because many of the slums are, I'm talking here about the Indian context, that many of the slums are not present in the official municipal government documents. And also, so they are not really, they do not feature in the documents, and so they are not taken care of by the municipal authorities. And there is also the issue of inadequate tenure security. And the slum dwellers are unwilling to invest in their own environmental improvements because they do not have the security of the tenure. But also most severe are the issues of capacity challenges. Now, participatory planning processes, although are ideal, but are extremely time consuming and requires an extensive engagement between these different stakeholders who are located in different planes, different platforms. to bring them together. And I mean, it also requires very extensive engagement of the community-based organizations and the local governments in India particularly, and I mean, other South Asian and Asian countries often have very inadequate technical capacity. They also have financial constraints, and also there are deficiencies regarding inadequate decentralization and political empowerment. So in this situation, you know, I mean, this case that I'm going to discuss here, it is about Jaga Mission. It's a program called Jaga Mission, or the English name of it is this Odisha Livable Habitat Mission. So this mission, it is started by the Odisha state, which is located in the red color you can see in the east. Yeah. This was started as a state government driven program. It was not started at a city level. And I mean, in the first stage, it was a program to give rights to the urban dwellers. And in a short time, the state government was able to give land rights to about 200,000 slum dwellers, and which is often talked about as one of the largest, which is often talked about as one of slum upgrading programs in the world. Yeah. So the land rights, the first stage of the act was to bring out a Land Rights Act, which provided tenure security to all the slum dwellers across the state. There are 109 urban local body, 109 small towns, and 5 bigger cities. So this act provided land rights to these people, the slum dwellers. And in the second phase of the project was to give them, turn the slums into, upgrade the slums into permanent houses with toilets and community facilities. So the Jaga Mission actually has, but you know, implementation of a participatory slum upgrading program, it's not easy, and it requires a large interface between large numbers of actors. So this act, I mean, once the state government came up with the act, the second phase was to carry out an intensive drone survey. So this drone survey was carried out in all the 109 small towns in the state. And the drone survey then led to cadastral mapping. And then after the cadastral maps were put in place, which provided fairly accurate data about the slums. But the next stage was to validate this data on the ground. And this was done, the physical verification of the data. This was done by involving the local community actors and by involving the local people, the slum dwellers themselves. So the slums which are not located on tenable lands, which are in environmentally vulnerable areas, those were also earmarked for relocation to a nearby area. Now, once this data was verified on the ground, the next, because I mean the data verification by involving the local people was very essential, because people are very possessive about their land, and I mean there could be legal disputes about the land. So that is why I mean the local people were involved to verify the data. The next stage was to give allocation of land titles. So all the slum dwellers were given land titles up to 30 square meter land titles. I mean, the land was given to people, and in bigger towns, and up to 45 square meter was given to the people in the smaller settlements. And then came the planning stage, where the need arose to bring out a participatory needs assessment. So again, there was a very intensive community consultation was done to bring out, to understand what are the needs of each and every of these slum communities, and what basic infra. The next stage was to, I mean, once the planning stage was done, then came the issue of the implementation stage. Now here, I mean, as I was mentioning, the urban local governments in India are very, very in a difficult stage in terms of their financing. So but there are some state government and national government driven programs, so which were aligned to bring in a convergence of different state and national government programs were aligned to bring in the slum improvement. And once the slum dwellers were given land rights, they qualified to get house building loans from the national government housing subsidy scheme. And also some amount of funds were mobilized from the corporate sector through corporate social responsibility grants. The next stage came the construction phase. The construction phase again sought to involve the local people, the slum dwellers themselves, into carrying out the construction work themselves. So instead of giving out works related to water supply, paved roads, building of the community centers, street lighting, instead of giving out these works to private contractors, the work was actually given to the slum dwellers associations. So the slum dwellers associations were tasked to carry out the work. In some cases, they faced difficulty in doing the work themselves. So then they were allowed to employ a contractor, but they were given the responsibility to certify the bills that the contractor has put in. And then the final stage is after the slum has been improved in terms of its environmental conditions, and I mean the houses have been turned into permanent houses. So then they can apply for reclassification of their slum area from the municipal records to be denotified as a slum and reclassified as a residential settlement. So the Slum Dwellers Association then becomes a resident welfare association. So here are some of the photos. The first stage of the drone survey was done to demarcate the property boundary of the slum area itself. The second, after the boundary was established, then the data points were overlaid over the zoom image to identify the house locations. And then the third stage, building footprints were digitized by using satellite imagery and also using the field observation for guidance and data verification. So here are some of the, you can see some fieldwork going on. Some of our own university students were involved into this door-to-door data verification work. And also, when this participatory needs assessment survey was done, this was done by involving the local people. The survey and at the local level, the issue was coordinated by the municipal ward office. Some NGOs were involved, and of course, the slum dwellers associations were at the center stage of this coordination activity. So they came to take part in the deliberations about the needs assessment, what they really expect from the government, and what the facilities are required for the slums. Then the infrastructure was put in place. The government program was to turn the slum areas into sustainable habitats. And there were 9 elements which the government decided to fund: roads, house toilets or community toilets, regular water supply, sanitation, drainage and electricity, and also public spaces with amenities. Now, as we come to the issue of governance, which is actually the heart of the issue of bringing a collaboration between the people, what happened in this particular case
Shedi, your time, if you can.
Yeah, I'm just wrapping it up. Yes. So just one more slide. So it is a combination of top-down and bottom-up program. It is a program anchored by the state government and helped by mobilization of funds from the national government, and also ground level monitoring. The NGOs played a big role. There was an issue of data-driven governance. The drone survey speeded up the process, which could not have been done manually, but the drone survey was verified through validation on the ground, and which helped to bring people's trust, which is very important in carrying out slum redevelopment work. Finally, this is about a participatory governance. Active involvement of the Slum Dwellers Association had been the key to gaining the trust at the neighborhood level. And the planning responsibilities, there some amount of livelihood support was also provided to the local people, so that they can earn through their own shelter creation. Another aspect was gender inclusion. The Slum Dwellers Associations are developed in a gender inclusive manner. 50% of the seats are reserved there for the women in the executive committee, and the women's names are the first names in the land deeds. And finally, the issue is about trust and transparency. The project was started in the small towns, which are less complicated to do. And once the message started spreading, the early success, then it was incorporated into the bigger cities. So these are my references. So that is the end of my presentation. So I'll be happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Achedi. Actually, what you have presented is like it's a more details of collaborating development and facilitating people to do it themselves. And you went on explaining to us that participatory process is not an easy, because you have to juggle around explaining policies that are not sometimes talking to one another, the government and the national, and also the issue around the politics of who locates where, and the possessiveness of people with their land. The fact that there was a slum dwelling association which was able to do it themselves, I think it's a positive thing on what you have given to us. And for us as planners, we can learn a lot from the approach that you have executed in your area. Thank you so much. We are now going to be moving on to the paper written by Koketso Mary Jane Lesedi Maimela. The title of the presentation would be Social Housing Project Perpetuating Spatial Poverty, the case of Rama City Housing Project in the city of Johannesburg. So it looks like we are in South Africa again. Over to you, Mary Jane. Are you guys loading your presentation? Look like I'm not getting a response. Oh. Okay, probably there's a network problem from their side because they're not indicating. Maybe we can take number 4, presenter number 4, or Umtafu Munda, and he'll be taking us through to reducing food loss along the value chain for improving nutrition security and income in Mzozo City in Malawi. Mtafu, if you can take us through.
Thank you very much. Can I just share my screen?
Yes, you can.
Is it visible?
Yes, you can see it.
Thank you very much. What I'll be presenting is a project that was funded by the Australian Centre for International Agriculture Research and the IDRC Canada on managing food value chains for improved nutrition for urban vulnerable populations in the city of Mzuzu. I can mention that this project is also underway in Zambia. The difference is only the name of the city. Here in Malawi, it's a collaboration of the Mzuzu University and the Urban Research and Advocacy Center. The main idea was to address the growing food insecurity in the countries of sub-Saharan Africa, where rapid urbanization and increasing poverty are shifting the historical focus of food and nutrition insecurity from the rural areas. So I don't want to go into much detail because I have put up certain slides which I thought would be very essential for all of us. But I can mention that in general, in the city of Mzuzu, up to about 41% of the population is estimated sometimes not to have any kind of food to eat because they may not have adequate resources in form of money. And this is a very fast growing city, the fastest growing in this country, and yet the population is just under 300,000. So we can see that if these challenges continue, we may have problems to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals on zero hunger as well as on inclusive cities. So our main problem that we saw was that within the studies that have been undertaken on food loss, most of them have focused on food loss at the household level, focusing on people overcooking and throwing maybe most of their food to the bin. So we felt that we should look at the whole chain from the harvest stage, post-harvest, the transportation and the market, especially the open markets, as you can see on your right there. Our main argument was that if there is a loss in terms of food along the value chain, then that will be equal also to loss in nutrition, but also economies of the people that are involved, in particular the farmers and the traders. And most of these are small scale people. So the main objective was to identify and characterize the nature and scale of food and nutrition loss in the fresh food chains and to define its drivers and implications in the city of Muzuzu. In particular, we wanted to map the role of the chain actors and the processes as well as power dynamics to analyze food losses in terms of quantity and quality, and also the farmers and the traders' incomes from the market from the farms to the market. And then we wanted also to explore and test some innovations that would help us reduce food loss and improve food quality and safety in that chain. In that regard, my colleague was talking about co-production area. We engaged several stakeholders to co-create and co-produce the quantitative and qualitative tools for data collection. So we had questionnaires, key informant interviews, focus group discussions, and workshops. A total of 440 questionnaires were administered across the Muzuzu city region. And the main target were stakeholders that are directly involved in the production of fresh food. So we looked at the farmers, the transporters, the marketers, but also those that are involved in the policy formulation, the city officials, government officials, local politicians, the planners, cooperative leaders, as well as open market leaders, especially the market committees. Our main focus was on leaf vegetables, fruit vegetables, meat and meat products, milk and milk products, poultry, roots and tubers, and fish. So I have just picked out some of the results that are maybe prominent for purposes of the theme of the Inclusive Cities Conference. So if I look at the losses that were incurred during the, my screen is showing that it's a, let me just move this one out. Okay, the losses by volume, as you can see there, we found that there were a lot of losses along the whole chain, but most of the losses were for leafy vegetables. And if you can see that, in fact, all these farmers were reporting that they have some loss or the other. And then even though many of these farmers produced different types of food crops, there were a small percentage that were involved in what might be seen as high value food crops, such as meat products, legumes, milk. The milk was largely produced by one cooperative. Is it moving there? Good. Now the economic losses. This was quite a tricky exercise to do. But to us, we looked at the total losses that are experienced by the farmers in terms of kilograms as a function of the market value. For example, if tomatoes are sold at 800 kwacha per kilogram, then how much is the loss if we multiply with the total number of kgs that were lost? So you can see here that a total of about 20 million Malai kwacha was lost in the chain, just focusing on the amount of the products that we are working with. And we see also there that milk only from one cooperative was losing about 9 million Malai kwacha, largely because of high perishability. And the challenge there, you see that the farmers' immediate solution was basically just to throw away their product, to sell at lower prices, or in fact to use the product as a animal feed. The other activity that we embarked on was to look at the nutrition losses. And in this one, we focused on the tomatoes and the fish, but here I will report only on tomatoes. The basis of the nutrition loss was the standardized Malawi food composition table, which is used by the Malawi government, and it provides the exact nutrition content of each of the food products. So for example, we have here per 100 grams of tomatoes, we expect to have about 42. The energy would be 26 calories and the like. But when we did our analysis, we found that the tomato was losing a lot of nutrients in both the potassium, vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin C, along the whole chain. And these losses were occurring more seriously at harvest. And as you can see there, potassium was the worst of all. The main cause of this was seen to be poor handling of the product. The other results from the market, I picked out this one deliberately so that I can highlight certain things that are related to governance and inclusivity. We had a question which asked the traders what would be their preferred trading spaces at the market. And you can see there that about 37% wanted to trade under the shelters within the market, but 38% want to be on the street. When we asked the same question to the women, 52% of them want to trade on the streets. 34% want to be in the shelters and 13% in the stands. Now, the key issue to look at there is the reason behind those preferences, which include inadequate spaces, poor allocation of the markets, biases in the space allocation inside the market, and women not being favored in allocation of premier trading sites. So as you can see on the right there, the market was completely rejected by the people because they argue that it is poorly sited in the cities behind another market which is existing, and it's completely vacant. And yet a lot of money was spent. And you look on the other picture there, that's the entrance, one side of the entrance of the central market. And you see all the women are actually outside there, mainly because they don't have the premier trading sites inside the market. Within the market itself, there was also lack of storage facilities, unreliable water supply, and unreliable energy supplies. And as such, the traders had to self-provide for these services. So you find people collecting water from standpipes from elsewhere, and you could suspect also some of the water they are using inside there could be from the streams which are nearby. Another issue that we noted was that the market bylaws provide that the market committee belongs to the Muzulu City Council and is not directly elected by the traders themselves. And that was an issue that caused a lot of animosity. Now, to conclude, what we found on this study is that the food losses occur along the whole chain from harvest, post-harvest, transportation, and at the market. But more of the food is lost at harvest stage than the other stages. And there are many ways in which the fresh food is lost in terms of quality and the quantity. And we see that there are technical processes as well as technical and process-oriented and gender and governance-related challenges that are causing those losses. And key among them include the poor handling methods, lack of storage facilities, and inadequate food shelters at the farms and also at the market. Gender and social challenges include the limited women involvement in the market governance and the widespread and transparent and manipulative elements. I want to report on what we did after finding these results. The first was to look at the trialing of what we saw would be the solution to the challenges that the farmers and traders were facing. For example, for the fish farmers, we found that they were spending a lot of their money on importing floating feed from Zambia. And as a result of that, the feed was overstaying due to the long transportation chain, but also there was a poor management of the ponds. So we assisted the farmers with the support of the Department of Fisheries to produce this feed on their own at their own farms. And we found that the fish that were harvested afterwards were much larger, and there was a possibility that they would be earning more money. So if you look on my left there, is the fish that was harvested before this trial I am talking about. And in the middle and the far right are the fish that were harvested after 1 month of stay. And yet this fish on the left had stayed in the ponds for about six months. So we felt that if we could do this to the farmers, then they could improve their earnings and also nutrition. The second trial we did was on tomato jam. We found that there were a lot of tomato losses at the market, and most of this was just being thrown away. So we intervened by identifying 6 willing tomato traders to undergo basic training on how they could convert the would-be waste tomato into jam. Yes, please.
If you can summarize.
Yes, please, I am. And then perhaps the other one I can mention there, as a result of that training, they were able to produce tomato jam. I can only mention also about another impact that we showed for the milk farmers who were complaining about their milk going bad or going sour because they were concentrating on fresh milk. So we trained them so that they can focus instead on production of yogurt. And the result is that what you see on my right there, on the right picture, well-packaged yogurt. The last one was the training of the women on gender in the market so that they are able to participate in the governance of the market. Interestingly, the City Council has accepted to revise the bylaws so that we can have gender mainstreamed, and the women-only committee has been adopted, and it's doing this job perfectly well now. So finally, I want to suggest that the inclusion of the urban poor and marginalized has potential to contribute to SDGs, and therefore our research projects should not end with conclusions and recommendations, because I think we have the ethical role to show to the state and the people what is possible. So we need capacity building and technological solutions that can reduce food loss, improve food security and incomes. And finally, improved market governance and gender mainstreaming across the chains can address food insecurity and urban poverty. I thank you very much. Zaki, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tafo. It was a really interesting presentation responding to 2 SDGs, the zero hunger and the inclusive cities, and the inclusivity and sustainable development. I really like the narrative behind the preference due to where the market is in terms of the buyers, and also the restriction around a better space for women traders, and the solution around getting them into a governance and leadership was very empowering for them. Also, you touching on the importance of resources, training, and the upliftment of the community you are dealing with. I think the 3 presentations that have been deliberated on in this room are really talking to one another. Colleague, I have a co-chair with me, which I think it should be prudent for me to give him an opportunity also to have a share of sharing this session, and starting by getting him to take questions and answers. Over to you, Emmanuel. Can you take over from now?
All right. Thank you very much, Zaki, and thank you very much to all the presenters for sharing your work, your thoughts, and also contributing to this session. allow me, colleagues, to then first, before we dive deeper into the question and answer session, just to adjust a little bit. If Koketso Mary Jane Lesedi Maimela has joined the meeting, please indicate that you have done so on the chat platform so that we can then determine how to accommodate your presentation going forward. I think for now, colleagues, allow me to then open up the question and answer sessions. And I think already on the chat platform, there has been a question that was raised. The question would, I think, an answer session, we would not be taking more than 3 questions in this session. And then we will then ensure that the presenters respond. Once they have responded, then we will then get into the second slot of our session. So first up, I would like to determine by a show of hands if there are 3 burning questions before I get into the question that was already posed on the chat platform. Please give me an indication. If there are questions, then we'll fill those. But also, if I may, in the interim, also share my reflections of the 3 presentations that we shared, starting with the first one from Luis. I think for me, the main takeaways there was looking at inclusivity from a moral perspective and indicating that it's a fundamental requirement for creating sustainable and equitable societies. That stuck with me because as we are touching on different elements of inclusivity, it's always important to ensure that no one is left behind and all voices are heard. Finally, the second presentation also from India, it looked at, the whole question of implementation challenges for participatory slum upgrading, and the phenomena of informality across cities globally has been such a huge challenge, and it was quite refreshing to then also get another perspective that looks at it through the lens of inclusivity and ensuring that the vulnerable and the poor within urban settings are also, part of the solutions. Finally, what stuck with me with Mr. Manda's presentation was inclusion of the urban poor and marginalized has the potential to contribute to sustainable development goals. So you took a global perspective and you attached your work to it and ensure that it resonates with the theme of this conference. I think that for me would take us nicely to now a question that was posed on the chat. I'll get to it and read it out, and bear in mind that the question is raised to the broader room. The question reads as follows: what initiated the collaborations between private associations, the government, and voluntary participants in the transformation of slums? Was this collaboration driven solely by academic research, or were there other influencing factors? I think let's start first with the 3 presenters. Any takers to attempt to respond to this loaded question? Luis?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure if I'm able to respond to this transformation of slums, because I see a specific question that was addressed directly to me. I think this one was directed to Mr. Govenda.
Yes, by all means, I think they can fill it. I accept that. Thank you.
Okay. So I don't know if I can respond to the one that was posed to me first, or I can allow Mr. to respond to.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Very interesting question that was posed to me. Very difficult to respond to, but I'll try. how can Afrocentric governance principles in conjunction with co-production theory be applied to urban planning and smart cities in Africa to enhance community-centered and cultural acceptable construction processes? I'll try to respond to this from my public management and governance perspective. To say, firstly, exclusion is against the principles of Ubuntu. So, for example, if we are to have smart cities, maybe to have safe cities, we must take on the input of those who are supposed to benefit from the smart cities. If we are to build, maybe in construction, I'm not really don't have real knowledge about construction processes, but I would think that from a government point of view, it would be very important to take on board the input, particularly of those people that are affected, mainly the marginalized, the underrepresented, and the marginalized in cities. They have their input, their participation in things that are going to benefit them must be taken on board. Yes, with zeroing in the spirit of Ubuntu, for example. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that response. As we move along, if there aren't any further questions that are arising, I will be then proceeding with the room activities by lining up the next series of presentations. The next presentation will be delivered by Zakira Jiva. The topic would be, is inclusive and integrated development really working for South African settlements? Zakira is from the Northwest University, South Africa, University of Ukonibu-Pirima, where I hail from. So Zakira, if you're ready, please let me know so that we can then engage with your presentation. Then Zakira's presentation will be followed by a presentation by Femi Balogan with the topic Public Transport Operation and Compliance with COVID-19 Preventative Measures in the Cities of Southwestern Nigeria. Femi is from the University of Abidan in Nigeria. And then the last presentation will be delivered by Faranani Gete, Preska Simbanegavi, and Pride in Ndlovu. The topic being practical guidelines towards successful implementation of land value capture in South Africa. They hail from the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. May we please get the next presentation flighted? Zakira, are you on board? In the event that Zakira is not ready to present.
I am. Hi, how are you?
Oh, thank you very much. I'm good at
I am. I'm just wondering if you could share my presentation. I've shared it previously. I am joining via tablet, so it's not sharing.
All right, please give me a moment. I certainly wasn't prepared for that. I need to make a number of moves. And I just determined if Femi is ready to go, and then we can then make an arrangement for you, Zakira. Femi, are you ready to move?
Yes, I am ready.
Yeah, may I please request that you move, and then we'll line up Zakira's presentation after yours. Thank you.
Okay, let me try to upload my slides.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, is it showing?
It does show.
I'm preparing to upload my slide.
Okay, are you starting with yours? Okay, it's fine. I'm going to get mine off.
Thank you. I'm confirming if my slide is now visible to the audience.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, can I move on in the presentation now?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity for giving me the audience. I am Femi Adekunle Balogun. I'm presenting a research paper on public transport operation and compliance with COVID-19 preventive measures in the cities of southwestern Nigeria. By the virtue of introduction, but can you please allow me to share I want to share my video so that for elaborate and feasible discussion. Thank you. So by the virtue of introduction.
May we please request to see your face? There's a request. Suppose there is a need for one to be seen and also for colleagues to attach the name to a face. If you are comfortable with presenting with your face reflecting, please do so. Thank you.
I have on my video. I want to ask if it's visible now.
All right.
Is it visible now?
Not yet.
Oh. Yes, it is. This is Femi Balogun here. Can you see my video?
Noted. I think in the interest of time, let's proceed.
Go ahead, we can see.
My video is visible here.
Yeah, we can see your video. You can go ahead.
Good. Just like I said, thank you again for giving me the audience. I am Femi Adekunle Balogun. I'm presenting a research paper titled Public Transport Operation and Compliance with COVID-19 Preventive Measures in the Cities of Southwestern Nigeria. Introduction. Introduction. Meaning of public transport operation. Public transport operation in the context of this paper means a vehicle operated by a passenger transport company or a bus company in the provision of public transport service, but does not include a school bus. Importance of public transport operation. Public transport operation plays a significant role in the social and economic growth of cities. More so, casual observation shows that over 50% of the public transport in developing cities is informal and privately owned, in which over 70% of the commuters rely on for movement from one destination to the other. Challenges of public transport operation during COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria. Public transport operation was hit hard by the unprecedented advent of coronavirus pandemic, which severely impedes the movement of low and middle income earners who have no alternative mode of transportation. This is because the public transport system is considered at high risk, which is attributable to higher passenger density, mostly during peak hours. Hence, several preventive measures such as restriction of interstate transport operation, enforcement of passenger physical distancing, reduction in the expected number of passengers, among others, were introduced, but compliance with this was questionable, which gave reason for the study statement of problem. The pursuit on public transport operation and compliance with COVID-19 preventive measures, especially social stroke physical distancing, do not sit well with the concept of urban mass transit. However, cities still require the public transport services to be operational, especially for essential workers during this period. The quest for an answer. In the quest for an answer to this pursuit, The study examines public transport operations compliance with coronavirus preventive measures in the southwest of Nigeria. Aim and objective of the study. The aim of this study is to examine the compliance of public transport operation with coronavirus preventive measure in southwestern Nigeria with a view to controlling the spread of the infection or other measures or other activities need to be adopted for forthcoming similar occurrences in the state. To achieve the same, the specific objective is to identify and discuss the indicators of course in relation to public transport operation. These indicators include partial and total lockdown of human activities and services, restriction of interstate transport operation, enforcement of passengers, physical distancing, reduction in the expected number of passengers, regular hand washing with soap and alcohol-based sanitizer, and wearing of nose mask or face mask. Research hypothesis. Public transport commuters will try to validate this hypothesis for the benefit of the study. The hypothesis stated that public transport commuters seeking compliance with the government directive on COVID-19 preventive measure is a function of education, restriction, and presence of law enforcement agents. Summary of hypothesis testing techniques and expected result. Research formulated hypothesis was tested by using ridge regression. Ridge regression was considered best because the nature of the hypothesis is multicollinearity, where both dependent and independent variables varies at more than 2 levels. The result was statistically significant at 0.05 significance level. Literature review. Concept of public transport governance anchored this study, while the theory of citizen participation was used in supporting the assertion of the concept. Research methodology. This section consists of methodological approaches and procedural steps employed in carrying out the study. For methodological approaches, we talk about research design, the data gathering, data processing, analysis, and presentation. And then for procedural steps, we talk about sampling frame, sampling size, sampling techniques, data types, data sources, and data analysis. Research design. The study adopted a cross-sectional survey design of data collection on public transport operation and compliance with COVID-19 preventive measures in southwestern Nigeria. These data were analyzed. This data are presented in form of table. Data type, sources, and instruments. Qualitative data used for this study was sourced from both primary and secondary sources. For primary data, closed and open-ended questionnaire was used in the collection of data from respondents who are 18 years and above. Secondary data was sourced through extensive review of literature. Target population, sample population, and sample size. The target population for the study comprised selected commuters in the southwestern state of Nigeria. Due to largeness of the target population and time constraint, 123 respondents were selected across the southwestern states. Sampling techniques and procedure. Convenient sampling techniques was used in selecting 123 respondents in the southwestern state as follows. In Ekiti State, we have 11 respondents, Lagos State, 26 respondents, Ogun State, 13 respondents, Ondo State, 5 respondents, Osun State, 10 respondents, and then Oyo State, 58 respondents. A link containing the research instrument was created through a Google form, distributed through social media platform groups such as WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, among others, and pleaded to reshare to other groups by the first respondents. Research major findings. Among the findings, the major ones include number 1, majority, 65% of the commuters use public transport to visit families, friends, then commercial places and worship centers. 2, 58% of the commuters were non-compliant with social or physical distancing during COVID-19 pandemic. 3, Komutas' level of safety, 33% is low in contacting coronavirus during this period because of their non-compliance. 4, 27% of the Komutas use soap and water, 10% use alcohol-based sanitizer, 48% use nose mask, while 1% use hand gloves as preventive measures during COVID-19 pandemic. 5, regression shows that level of education does not influence Komutas' compliance with COVID-19 preventive measures at p-value greater than 0.5, while restriction of movement and presence of law enforcement do influence Komutas' compliance with COVID-19 preventive measures at p-value less than 0.05. Research implication, conceptual theoretical implication. Research findings validated the assumption of poor public transport governance during COVID-19 pandemic, in the sense that poor operationalization of public transport exposed commuters to high risk in contacting coronavirus. Plan implication. The paper re-emphasized the important obligation of health and infrastructural planners to give adequate consideration to public transport operation in the preparation of terminals and motor parks design, as they are functions of safety. Policy implication. The paper evolved a policy guide to Southwestern state government on the creation of regulatory body that will see to the operationalization of public transport in order to enhance safety condition for commuters in the future. This can be realized through strategic, participatory, incremental, and replicating principle. Practical recommendations. Based on the findings of the study, the following practical steps were recommended. 1, policymakers and stakeholders should create awareness to the citizens on the implications of non-compliance with pandemic preventive measures. 2, commuters and park managers should be educated and engaged on compliance with COVID-19 preventive measures on all other likely occurrences. Why? Number 3, sanctions and fines should be levied on violators. Contribution to knowledge. This study therefore contributed to knowledge by asserting that level of education does not influence commuters' compliance with COVID-19 preventive measures, but restriction of movement and presence of law enforcement do influence commuters' compliance across the southwestern state in Nigeria. Conclusion: weak public transport governance. It is quite unfortunate that weakness in the operationalization of urban public transport expose commuters to high risk in contacting coronavirus in southwestern states. 2, the future hope. The future hope for safety is, in case of subsequent occurrences, is preconditioned on good public transport governance inclusivity. And until this is done, some of these southwestern states in Nigeria will continue to be vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Femi, for the insightful presentation. We will encourage the participants to note their questions and raise them at the end of the session. Allow me to then go back to the colleague who was meant to present first, Zakaria Jiva. Are you now in a position to upload? Because at some point it appeared that you were.
Hi, I'm going to try doing it the same way I tried previously. If the presenter before me can just take the screen off, I can try again. Thank you. Okay, I think it's sharing. Am I correct?
Yes, it is.
Hi.
Yes,
Okay,
it is.
fantastic. Hi, everybody. My name is Zakira Jiva. I am a town and regional planner. I am currently practicing as a researcher at the Thabo Mbeki Institute at UNISA. My topic for today is not really a research paper, but it's more a discussion paper with colleagues to determine whether inclusive and integrative development is really working in South Africa, right? So the question that came up was, many times we as planners, we focus a lot on city development and we fail to look at things on a municipal level. And this is something that I found in my PhD. We haven't acknowledged, so I'm going to take you through the study, and hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion at the end. All right, so when you look at inclusivity, inclusivity is defined as allowing and including everybody, not excluding anybody, right? Integrated development is to bring together and live together in peace. Development is a process of bringing about positive change in the quality of life. So in other words, I sat back and I said, is our country being structured in such a way that we are being inclusive, integrated, and bringing about positive change to everybody? To look at that in perspective, from a global context, we determined that urban areas are areas of high density and intensive development, right? And rural areas were settlements with low density and limited development. And with time, we found that urban areas were sprawling to create peri-urban areas, and they were then creating larger conurbations called metropolitans. And since 1980s, the United Nations has come up with a suggestion that these settlements are being inefficient because they're straddling over administrative boundaries. So a solution to that would be to create larger settlements to allow for more efficient development and infrastructure provision. Right, that's a global context. Now, what happened was in 1994, South Africa had this political change and we needed to start looking at our settlements, right? Previously, apartheid had promoted spatial and cultural segregation and inequality, and these created unnatural functional linkages, right? Why do I say unnatural functional linkages? Because your non-white areas were not allowed to have economic activity. So people were naturally forced out from their peri-urban or rural areas to urban areas to gain employment or services and then travel back. So when we had a change, sorry guys. When we had a change, we had to look at now, how are we going to then integrate our settlements together to create a more integrated structure? However, we had this additional problem of influx control measures, and where people were then banished from the homelands were then allowed to come into your urban areas. And there was also a lack of information how we were going to create these settlements. So we had an issue where we see this type of development. We had urban areas on the right side, rural areas on the urban areas on the right side, rural areas on the left side, and then you had peri-urban sprawl or slump development occurring in between the buffer zones. Right. So what happened was the Municipal Demarcation Board was then appointed to say, how then are we going to create new administrative areas? And they created the Municipal the Municipal Demarcation Act was legislated, the Municipal Structures Act was legislated, and the Municipal Systems Act was legislated, right? And one of the solutions that they came up was, we have to integrate urban and rural areas to facilitate racial integration and to bring about equality of opportunities and spatial infrastructure, right? However, we also had to absorb new migrants that were coming into these urban areas for economic opportunities. And then we also had the BEE policies that came into place that required the restructuring of the local administration as such, right? So you had a new administration in place with limited experience, and you had all of these issues coming about. So what that actually shows in the diagram was that the rural areas were then absorbing a lot of the poverty migrants because of the cheaper landscape, and those people wanted to get opportunities. However, the city then started growing northwards. I think we are all aware of that. So how then would you then delimit municipal boundaries? So one of the solutions they came up with was to integrate urban, rural, and peri-urban areas, similar to the United Nations, and we create integrated municipalities. However, we should take into account that we had 40 to 50 kilometers between our urban and rural areas that were undeveloped, unlike Europe. And then they categorized them as category A, category B, and category C municipalities. Over the years, these municipal boundaries have been allowed to shift for numerous reasons every 5 years. And some of the reasons include financial viability, cohesiveness, amalgamation, or the community that basically just wanted them to move. What this has resulted in is that we now have municipalities that look very much like this in terms of functionality. We have large-scale urban-rural migration out. We have overpopulated urban areas and large areas that are left depopulated, right? However, one of the findings that I found was that instead of making the municipalities smaller because of the lack of population, the Municipal Demarcation Board has determined or amalgamated these areas because of dysfunctionality. So what we have is we have less municipalities, but larger municipalities. And the problem with that is we have large-scale dysfunctionality. So 163 municipalities of the 257 municipalities are currently in financial distress. 64 of them are totally dysfunctional. And the question that I have right now is our municipalities, our settlements becoming too big in the name of integration and inclusivity? And is it becoming too, and is this being done too quickly? And is rural and urban integration really a solution for South Africa? Should we not rather have looked at a more balanced development where we had smaller areas where we focus our attention and our finances, and then had them become strong enough before we start integrating, instead of integrating stronger areas with weaker areas, and then forcing the stronger areas to then, can I say, almost baby the weaker municipalities, right? And the reason why I'm saying is, this is the reality that we have on the ground. Right now, we only have one basket of finances. And the finances are then being distributed between deteriorating infrastructure and rapid migrations of individuals who demand services. And it's not working. Are we having deteriorating infrastructure at the same time? Plus we're having protests. So in terms of, are we reaching integration and inclusivity? Inclusivity, we found that although there's economic opportunities available and people have freedom of movement, economic inequality prevails because of large-scale unemployment, and the lack of services also excludes individuals from experiencing better quality of life. Integrated development, urban and rural areas have been integrated, but fragmentation and inequality still persist in our cities and our municipalities. Development, the number of protests and dysfunctional municipalities displays the lack of development, and therefore the study finds that there is no lack. South Africa is not managing to have inclusive integrated development at this moment in time.
Zakia,
yes,
if you can summarize.
Okay, the paper confirms that practical application of administrative reform to integrate urban and rural areas is not easy as it appears, since administrative areas are open systems that are influenced by multiple factors. And over the 25 years, South Africa has categorized its municipalities many different ways, including integrated and inclusive rural areas. However, with rapid urban-rural migration, we're finding rural areas with a lack of population still finding finances, while urban areas are being overburdened. Balanced development approach that looks at cities extending from wall to wall does not seem to be working, and hence we need to find a different solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zakira, for an interesting presentation that looks at the development of South Africa's municipalities and the challenges that they have faced and continue to face. I hope the participants have thought about questions to raise at the end, because in your presentation you also put across certain interesting position statements as well as questions that I think at the end we will take a bit of a deep dive into. With that being said, allow me to then cross-check again to determine if Faranani Gete, Preska Simba Negavi, and Pride Ndlovu are ready to present. As they are getting themselves ready, we will also, after their presentation, request the colleagues, Martins VI and Zaro ES, to also be ready to present. First up, Faranani Gete et al., their presentation title is called Practical Guidelines Towards Successful Implementation of Land Value Capture in South Africa, and they hail from the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. Colleagues, the platform is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let me just quickly try upload our presentation, and then I'll start as soon as I kindly indicate if you are able to see my screen.
It's not projecting yet.
Okay, otherwise then.
Are you clicking on share screen?
Chair, maybe you can give him some time to reconfigure his presentation, and then you get another presenter come first.
All right, thank you for that. Then Faranani, please work on the background just to prepare to present next. We apologize for this. In the interest of time, may we please request the following colleagues to upload their presentation. We are informed that they were meant to present yesterday and they were not afforded the opportunity. So allow me to introduce the following colleagues to present. Martins VI. Faranan, is that your presentation showing now?
Yes, I think so. Yes,
that is it.
Maybe let's proceed now that you are where you are. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'd like to apologize for that glitch. Once again, thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. My name is Faranani, as it has been indicated, and today I'll be taking you through a paper that we wrote with two of my colleagues, Dr. Priska Simba-Negavi and Pride Ndlovu. And the paper is titled Practical Guidelines Towards Successful Implementation of Land Value Capture. So I found it very interesting that with all the previous speakers were talking about inclusive cities and from planning perspective. So we come from a real estate background. So our presentation will touch more on the infrastructure side of things, even though it still, fits perfectly well, because I believe that you cannot speak about inclusive cities without talking about infrastructure and infrastructure funding. So this is just the outline of my presentation. So I will take you through the background, problem statement and research aim, literature review, methodology findings, and discussion, and then I will conclude and give recommendations. So just on the background of this study, so according to Zuka 2014, so he mentions that the developing world continues to experience rapid population growth, which I think even most of other presenters touched on this. And this has had a direct impact on government ability to provide basic services for the average citizens. Having said that, we will also remember that there is a very high rural-urban migration, so it continues to rise. And because of all of this, there has been insufficient infrastructure investment to address the developmental challenges, which in this country were exacerbated by the unjust planning laws of the past. And then also the global economy continues to decline, which then puts pressure on the fiscal constraints, and then that limits the infrastructure investments that are funded through government tax revenues. So according to National Treasury, at 2019, 2020, and 2021, South African government has been applying significant budget cuts on expenditure sheet, which has had negative impact on the public infrastructure funding. So in other words, there has not been enough funds to fund the much needed infrastructure for the development of the country. So all of this that we have mentioned then raises a very pertinent question regarding the government's affordability and capacity to fund infrastructure projects for the much needed development. So the problem statement of our study was that the problem is that the current alternative funding mechanism through land value capture, a universal remedy to development, is still disjointed and not well contextualized to fill the gap of funding infrastructure projects effectively in South Africa. So in other words, land value capture is not successfully being used as an alternative funding model in South Africa, even though the traditional or conventional method of funding infrastructure is not enough. So the aim of this research was then aimed to recommend a set of guidelines using planning gain theory and investment theories on the ways in which the implementation of land value capture financing to fund infrastructure development by South African local government. So previous studies that we looked at, Mark Gaffin 2019, so he mentions that infrastructure investment is known as a key factor for economic growth and also for social inclusivity. VUCAEA 2015 says that for a significant economic growth of emerging economies, which in this context would be South Africa, infrastructure investment, which is equivalent to 25% of the gross domestic product, is required. So the traditional method of funding infrastructure development seem inadequate to respond to the increasing need, hence the importance of alternative model for funding infrastructure. And in this case, the alternative model is the land value capture. So the funding constraints places a pressure on municipalities to do trade-off between infrastructure investment for economic development and also redressing the historical imbalances. And here, these are just some theoretical underpinnings that we looked at for this study. So firstly, we'll try to just define what land value capture is. So land value capture is a way of ensuring that benefits generated by infrastructure projects, including increases in property value, help fund those projects and future projects. Maybe just to put it in a context of an example is that land value capture is policies that says that public office would invest in an infrastructure project with the hope of capturing the value back at a later stage. For example, if government builds, let's say, a school in a neighborhood, the property values in that specific neighborhood would go up because of now there's a school people can be able to like live next to the school. And when the property values of that specific neighborhood goes up, then government, which is local government in this context, are then able to capture that value back. It could be through property rates. There's other instruments such as tax increment, financing, major beneficiaries contributions, and so on and so on. So another a theory that we looked at, it's planning gain theory, which basically says that it's a concept developed from the theory of planning gain, where private developers cannot recoup sufficient returns on their investment unless developers upgrade public roads and water supplies. So the methodology used for this paper, so the study adopted a qualitative method approach where two sequential research design was followed, as shown here on this figure XA. So the step one was a literature review, and then we also conducted interviews, and then we did interviews with experts in local government and infrastructure into funding. And here are the findings. So from the data that was collected from semi-structured interviews, we found that the reason why land value capture is not being utilized effectively in South Africa. So one of the themes was that there is lack of awareness around this concept of land value capture. There is no policy framework for that guides the use of land value capture concept. The other thing that we have found was that there is a legislative hindrance. So in many instances, we find that legislature around land value capture was not clear. There was over-reliance on treasury instead of like local government being the driver for this concept, land value capture. So the other thing that we found from the data was that there was generally lack of understanding of the concept, especially from those who were supposed to be implementing or the policy makers. And then there was also lack of coordination between departments. So most of the time you find that within the local government context, so there was sort of like no one knew where this policy was supposed to be placed, and so on and so on. So in conclusion, so the paper concludes that there is legislation shortcomings as far as the land value capture is concerned. And then there is challenges such as awareness, policy framework, etc., that are deterring the successful implementation of land value capture. In conclusion, the other thing that we found is that there's significant inconsistencies between how land value capture is currently being implemented and what the interview data appraises it to be. And then lastly, land value capture to deliver infrastructure is still hazy and fragmented in South Africa. Then we therefore then came up with a recommendation to say if South Africa wants to use land value capture successfully to deliver as an alternative funding model to deliver infrastructure. These are the guidelines that they will have to follow. So there has to be an awareness and understanding, especially to the policy makers. So we have to raise awareness around this concept of land value capture. To local government has to develop or come up with some sort of a policy framework that guides how land value capture can be implemented. There has to be coordination between departments on the local government. And then there has to be legislation reform and clarification for the successful implementation. They also has to be municipal efficiency. So municipality has to have, a capability to implement this. And then the last thing, there's to be triple P's, so private partnership fund partnership, private public partnership, sorry, for the successful implementation of the land value capture. Thank you for your attention, and if there is any comments or question, I'll be happy to take those.
Thank you very much, Faranani, for a very interesting presentation. If I may take the opportunity just to
Manuel, we've lost you. Okay, look like we have lost the co-chair. I'll step in for him. He did indicate there are two presentations that we ought to listen to from Dr. Valda Martin and Eleni Stephanie Kalapoda. So if the two colleagues can load their presentation, starting by Dr. Martin, followed by Eleni, who will then conclude this session.
Yes, good afternoon. I am ready, Dr. Valda Martins.
Go ahead, Doctor.
All right, please let me share my slide. Is my slide showing, please?
Not yet.
Okay. Sorry, still trying to do that. I don't know if I can go on as I share the slide.
Here on.
Can I go
Yes.
on as I share my slides, please?
Let me try and share a slide as well.
All right. So I wait to be shared for me, please.
Load shedding.
Can you see your slide, Doctor?
Yes, thank you so much.
I'll put it on the slide mode then.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Valda Martins. I am here this afternoon to present a paper co-researched by Sado ES titled Assessments of the Vulnerability Level of Women Livelihood Activities in Lapai Local Government Area in Niger State, Nigeria. In a simple term, life existence, financially or vocationally. Anyone that have no means of livelihood is prone to poverty, which most women in developing countries states are prone to most times because of so many ills or odds against them, biological, religious, cultural odds are usually against women. See, most times before a woman can measure up to a man, if a man is taking a step, a woman has to take like 3 or 4 steps to measure up to the male gender. Livelihood as defined by Shimali and Sinai 2010 involve the flow of monetary and non-monetary resources that are exploited for continuous sustenance. Because women are being faced by some odds doesn't mean they shouldn't contribute to their lots, to the family, or to the society at large. Because if they are not carried along, they are not contributing, there is no inclusive city. So for a city to be inclusive, or for inclusiveness to be achieved in a city and its development, women must be involved in such activities that can help them and the family, else they'll be trapped in poverty. The study area and its economic activities. Lapa is a local government in Niger State. It is located on the southeastern part of the state. It shares boundary with some other local government like Paikoro, Agai local government area. It has a large land coverage and so many other local governments. The inhabitants of the local government in the study area are predominantly farmers, and as such, the town serves as a market center for sorghum, yam, millet, shea nuts, cottons, watermelons, and many other fruits that attract other people from different or neighboring states and communities to buy from the market on the market days that is once weekly. This is the image showing the study area. Then the methodology used for the study is the data for the study was collected through structured questionnaires from the 10 words in the local government. The local government comprises of 10 different words with a population of 95,335 using the 1991 Nigeria population of 1991 being projected. And the sample size gotten for the 10 words amounted to 383 questionnaires that were evenly and statistically, systematically assigned to the different words in the study area, which is the Lapai local government area. Then the method of measurement. There are two different approaches to measure livelihood vulnerability, the econometric approach and the indicator approach. Here we decided to use the indicator approach using some very important indicators to measure the level of vulnerability of the women in this in the study area. Because when a livelihood is vulnerable, if it's vulnerable, it may affect the sustainability of such livelihood, and so many other things like poverty and the crisis can actually come in. So we used education factors, economic factors, and environmental factors. In education factors, literacy level of the women, then the availability of skills. If it is said that the people of that environment, the study area, they are predominantly farmers, does it mean that they don't do any other, they are not engaged in any other livelihood activities? Because it is well known, it's actually the men that have such strength or the energy to actually do farming to an extent that it can actually sustain the family and add to the development of a community and a city. So the women being who we are created to be, most times we tend to want to add or do some other works that will be able to, in a way, level up with the male counterpart. Then the scale of measurement for the economic factor were primary, secondary, and tertiary type of skills. Then the economic factor, the women income level of savings. Do they earn income? Do they save at all? Or they just work and just consume? Then the weekly, the monthly income and their savings were looked into. Then the environmental factors that affect their livelihood and makes their livelihood vulnerable, to really check the level of vulnerability. The climate change, is it affecting what they do, their livelihood activities? Flooding, because the place is on a floodplain, Are they being affected by flood? Is erosion a problem? Is there drought in their environment that's actually affecting their livelihood activities? Then what are the health challenges faced? Then the occurrence of flood, how often or how frequent, how heavy, how serious is the flood activities in that area? The properties lost to erosion and environmental challenges that they faced in the study, the women faced in the study area. The education level. It was discovered that in the 10 words, some of the survey carried out revealed that 32% of the sampled women within the local government have acquired a level of education, which is primary form of education. According to the Nigerian government, a good number of women in Gbasa and Kudu ward have gone ahead to obtain different forms of tertiary education. This shows that women, if adequately equipped in other aspects, will be able to withstand the likely challenges they may face as regards to their livelihood activities. You know, when a woman is empowered, an empowered woman, or an educated woman rather, is an empowered woman, because education actually try to make a woman step up a bit, comparing her with another woman that is not educated. So it's an empowerment and a plus for any woman in a community or in a city to be educated. So the in our study area, it is shown that most of them actually have primary education, because this side of where the study area is located, they have there are some cultural and religious kind of barriers that may or that affect their level of education. But that being that some of them still go above or move above the odds to get their education. Then we also check the skills that they have acquired. Apart from being farmers, do they do any other thing apart from farming? Because most times, like I said earlier, just for them to assist their husbands, maybe to go and cook for them, sing for them while they are tilling the soil, or help them pack the farm produce to the house. Or if at all they want to do, they do a very small portion, not as big or as massive as the male counterparts may do. So the survey reveals that 79% of the women in the study area, that's Lapai, that they engage in livelihood activities that also have some kind of skills, such as that serves as their secondary livelihood means of acquiring income, that make them to kind of being able to help their families and the society. They have acquired skills like hair plaiting, baking, tailoring, amongst others. Then in their monthly income, some of them, the women, shows that the survey shows that majority of the women engaging in livelihood activities in Lapai local government area earn between 10,000 to 25,000 naira on a monthly basis. That is Nigerian money, 10 to 25,000 naira. This falls below the minimum wage approved by the Nigerian government, because our minimum wage is 30,000 naira. So the women in this area actually earn far a bit below the minimum wage for Nigerians. Thereby, the women, they are vulnerable. They are vulnerable and they are prone to poverty. This goes to show the growing rate of financial poverty within the Lapai women as regards to their livelihood activities. We can see their secondary means of livelihood, just plating, baking, and other petty skills that really cannot give them as much as their main counterparts can actually get by doing better jobs, doing more massive things and all that can help the growth of the society and cater for the family. The financial vulnerability is spread through women. There are other activities as their finances play a major role in other sectors, because without money, whether you are a man or you are a woman, you have little or nothing to do, because when you have money, you actually have that willpower, the zeal to contribute to the development of a country. Because someone that is hungry, or the children are crying, there is no food in the house, and a woman or a man cannot really produce, it makes a person powerless. Like poverty is a kind of disease that make people voiceless, make them powerless. So most of these women, because they cannot afford these things, they actually have little or nothing to say in the society, because they don't have what it takes to actually speak. Then the factors are affecting the livelihood activities of these women. Like I know most of us from different countries of the world, we've been reading about things that are happening in Nigeria, about the banditry and all those things that we've been facing. Some people in this area, the study area now, they may be facing, because it's not actually the whole of Nigeria. Even when we say Niger State, you read stories about Niger State of bandits attacking. There are still some local government areas that are still safe from these attacks, which this community or this local government is actually a part that is lucky not to have been be facing such attacks from the bandits. But they have their own setbacks too. And based on the outcome of the survey conducted, challenges leading to vulnerability in livelihood activities of women in government area are basically social, environmental, and environmental in nature. They are ranked according to perceived occurrence rate of impact on livelihood activities. Like in Muye and Egba and Ebogo and another word, the women are applying flooding as a major factor or major thing that is fighting against or limiting against their livelihood activities, or limiting their livelihood activities because of the location of their place. It's around a tributary of the Niger River that leaves them highly vulnerable, prone to flooding. So they are being limited, or they have limitations to what they can do, because at times when the flood comes to a certain area, the women or the family, the community will have to move to go to another area. So at the end of the day, their means of livelihood is being distorted or being taken away from them. So before they settle down in another area, it takes another time for them to get used to the area, to know what to do, how to do it, and how to make money, and how to for them to be accepted, to be included in the plans of the new area they have moved to, and for them to add to the development of the city. And again, they are first with the study area. They have facility problems. For instance, a woman that is not healthy cannot actually do anything. So discovered that the local government or the study area, they have just 2 general hospitals that are not actually even equipped, to take care of the women. So most times, some of the women, during childbirth, they die from childbirth because of lack of adequate medical attention. They have been sick, maybe with malaria, whatever it is, and they're not being taken care of. At the end of the day, any livelihood activities they have at that moment is being halted or being cut short because of the situation they found themselves, and there is no adequate medical attention. So at times, some of them, they go back and they don't go back to such activities. Either it has been taken over by somebody, or they have spent the money they have saved from their previous activity. They won't be able to start again to make more money to start whatever it is that they want to do. So in the chart, we can see that most of them, yes, some of them say flood, most of them say flooding. About 118 of them actually said this environmental factor is actually affecting their means of livelihood, that makes their livelihood very, very vulnerable. Then we have erosion. We have available infrastructure where the hospitals actually come under. Then stealing. Yes, at times they do their farming or they keep their wares, and they are being stolen by some people that actually need it more than them, that are uninvited. So in conclusion, the survey has been able to establish that vulnerability in livelihood of women in Lapai local governments of Niger State in Nigeria to a large degree is caused because of major factors like any low income, lack of adequate infrastructures, social, financial, and environmental challenges. The study therefore suggests that there is need to upgrade the financial situation of the women in the study area by at least adopting other financial support systems that would have a trickle-down effect and reduce livelihood vulnerability. The study also recommends that mechanisms should be put in place that would thwart the prevalent occurring flooding activities that cause loss of livelihood in the study area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. So long as the women are not empowered enough, we could not achieve an inclusive city. I think that's the message around your presentation. Colleagues, we are running behind time. If we can have the next presentation by Eleni Stephanie Galapora.
Thank you.
Galapora, yes.
Thank you so much. I think the previous participant is still sharing the screen because I am receiving an error that I cannot share my screen. Let me try again. No, I cannot share my screen. You cannot share screen, share while the other participant is sharing. This is the message that I am receiving.
I am the problem here. I'm trying to unshare.
Okay.
I am not winning for some reason.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try. Can you try?
Okay, thank you.
Are you winning?
Still, am I receiving the same message? Oh, okay. I think yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see. Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we.
Okay. So, my focus of discussion today is a research paper that I will be presenting using this format of a poster presentation, as it is seen currently on our screens. So, this is a project that I initiated during my master's degree at Columbia University, Master of Architecture and Urban Design. So as here is the title, the main topic affects the sanitation, service provision and water supply in Akaki, Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So internally displaced people face barriers in accessing water supply, sanitation provision and hygiene in Addis Ababa, especially under the climate change emergency. This paper builds upon the recent Addis Ababa Resilience Strategy to focus on the Water and Sewage Authority's plan to identify 3 outcomes. Firstly, how these perceptions between the communities and the government overlay. Secondly, how just and inclusive the urban sanitation and water supply provision plan is. And thirdly, what is the overall impact, qualitative and quantitative, of improving the urban water flows in and out of the city? So in terms of methodology that I followed, I built on the water resilience approach framework, integrated with spatial analysis, interviews and policy document reviews. The conclusion of the study is that both grassroots and top-down approaches do not successfully provide sustainable, accessible, and more just urban sanitation livelihoods in the city. One of the main reasons for this outcome is that the conventional approaches to urban sanitary improvement at the city level do not address the dual context of Addis Ababa, that being both a city of unplanned expansion and also being the capital of Africa's largest expanding market. So in overall, this research proposes to diversify the water production consumption cycle and suggests that a more inclusive coordination of a multi-scalar governance approach would optimize the supply and promote sustainable demand-side management practices as feasible climate change adaptation measures for a water shortage facing city such as the Addis Ababa. And now I would like to wrap up and I would like to move forward briefly describing the layout of the poster. So on the left side, on the left column here, I started with why it is relevant to use a climate change emergency framework, and the bottom up rather than a top-down approach in assessing the effectiveness of the service provision, while also I try to describe in detail, as we see here, the economic development policy framework of Ethiopia, and also the country's recognition of the water and sanitation as a constitutional right. Then I continued researching how the country's obligation and policies influence water and sanitation provision strategies on a city level in the Addis Ababa. And now moving here at the center of the poster, I highlight the city's water and sewage authority internal organization, the financial standing, and the strategies that the authority implemented already in order to increase access to sanitation service provision to the city residents. So in terms of these maps at the center, these maps showcase how these strategies are implemented in space and reveal the limited access to safe sanitation services. So how did I make these maps? So I used two methods. So for the first method, I overlaid the sewage grid with the physical, the economic, and the demographic context of the Addis Ababa in order to give perspective on how, in terms of spatial organization, these plans exclude residents from increased access, while I also explore the scientific literature and interviews and economic documents that showcase how the authorities' requirements for accessing the sewage grid contribute unequally to deciding who gains access. And in terms of the second method, I assessed the shared facility provision that the authority is using as a way to reach residents who might not be able to access the grid, to conclude the ineffectiveness of this measure in expanding the safe sanitation service. And lastly, here and on the right side and at the bottom, I provide recommendations of how to move forward that center equity in the city's water and sanitation provision framework. And in overall, I would like to conclude with one reflection that by highlighting the urban centers like the Addis Ababa as the country's engines of economic development based on top-down approaches and beautification, mega projects implementation, political agendas, this process will perpetuate the currently forced citizens to be further isolated from their recognized right to basic services and forced further into marginality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleni. Emmanuel, are you back?
Yes, I'm back, and thank you.
Okay.
For
I can hand over now.
All right. No, thank you very much for holding the fort and directing the deliberations. I apologize. I was removed out of the meeting due to an electricity challenge that we have. This is the opportunity for us to engage on the presentations that were flighted in this room. And this session is now open for discussions, questions and answers. Please give an indication as to whether there are questions arising from the floor, and then we'll give you the opportunity. Please indicate to who the question is directed so that they are then prepared to respond. Can we please engage around all the thoughtful presentations, colleagues? Thanks. I'm looking at the reactions. So far, I do not see any hands that are raised. Are we still there, room one?
I'm here. I'm not sure about other colleagues.
All right. I think from my end, just to sort of also reflect on some of the sort of statements that were impactful. Allow me to revisit the presentation that dealt with land value capture. I think there were some interesting thoughts there, Faranani, around your findings, in particular, the fact that the legislation becomes a hindrance around land value capture, given that you indicated that there seems to be an over-reliance on Treasury instead of local government being the driver, to drive infrastructure implementation so as to unlock development and ensure inclusive development. I have observed that phenomena, but my interest lies in, was it something that you expected, and what are the potential solutions to that, if you like, scenario, wherein we can then use the concept of land value capture and an enabling legislative environment, as opposed to a legislative environment that becomes a bit of a hindrance. Your thoughts around that aspect?
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel, and thank you so much for that question. I think it's a very good observation. So, to answer the first part of your question, yes, I think it's something that we expected when we went for the interviews, because we had picked that up from literature. So literature was talking about how, most of the time what we find is that legislature, it's either, so it's a hindrance in a way that it's very quiet about this concept. So it doesn't say much about it, but over and above that, it's like, it's unclear as to like who is supposed to be doing what as far as the concept is concerned. So, and the second part of the question, like maybe to say how do we then like rectify that? I think there has to be some sort of reform. Things like the act that deals with municipal administration and so on and so on, that would then at least cater for this concept, or like speak about it, so that they can be like some sort of an allowance in terms of like when one wants to implement it, to say how do we do it, because it says nothing. It's not saying anything about this about the concept and so on and so on. So yeah, thank you.
Right. No, thank you very much. A great sort of presentation and good work all around. And I must also admit that you plugged some of the knowledge gaps that I do have. So thank you very much. Zakira, may I please direct the next question to you? I would like you to take us through, some of the statements you made. One in particular indicated that, the phenomena of rural and urban integration. You posed a question: is it really a solution for South Africa? And I'm just trying to think, because I work for the city for eThekwini municipality, with Durban being the city center. The character, if you like, of the city is such that approximately 68% of the municipality is rural. So we do have rural, peri-urban, as well as urban areas. And as you were presenting, some of the day-to-day challenges that we experience in trying to overcome the challenge of exclusive development, came to the fore. So I would like you to probably put forward a scenario or a potential solution to how then should we develop, given our history of separate development. What's your take on this question, Zakira?
Hi, Emmanuel, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. Emmanuel, this is a double-sided edged sword, if I could put it that way. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? But one of the solutions that we have is we have to start capacitating our areas before we start integrating. Now, in the South African case, you could argue that rural areas were non-white. So if I argue that, you know what, you keep rural areas as rural, and then you keep urban areas as urban, and then you strengthen them, from an economic perspective, that would make sense. But if you look at it from a social, racial perspective, I will be deemed as being racially prejudiced, because then you're going to have Black area or non-white areas separated from white areas, and then you're recreating apartheid, right? My argument is it's 25 years later. If anybody wanted to integrate into these areas, they would have been integrated already. In terms of that, can we not then create smaller municipalities of 25 kilometers radius and delimit them objectively in terms of maybe population density or economic viability or agglomeration factors, and then build on their strengths as SEZs, that's special economic zones. Once that is strong enough and capacitated enough, and you feel like there is a need for them to start integrating areas a bit further, then we start integrating. But until we don't see these areas being strong enough, I think we should leave them as small areas, which would allow for public participation, for economic activity, for social development, for hands-on development, and then start integrating. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Interesting thoughts there, and certainly a lot of food for thought, for us urban practitioners. Allow me to switch gears again to then pick the brains of Femi. Femi, just around the overall topic that you shared with us today, from your experience in terms of how COVID-19 preventative measures perhaps had certain shortcomings or were not. If I look at personal experiences of global travel, or if one has to, well, during the peak COVID times, when you had to travel, you would be social distance as you are checking in and being processed by customs and then getting the next passenger. And I thought, why are we doing all these measures if we are still going to be in close contact with each other? But
Yes, sir. Sorry, more one meeting.
Oh, sorry.
did you get the question, Femi?
No, I lost the voice. So maybe you repeat it.
Okay, I'll shorten the question.
Yeah.
The measures, COVID-19 measures that were implemented in the transport sector, did create a scenario where the spread of the pandemic was prevented? Were they effective? Because as I made an example from a personal experience during peak COVID times, when one had to travel, let's say if you're flying from one city to the next, you had to be processed in a particular way, observing social distances, only to, in the ultimate scenario, sit very close next to the next passenger. Then I thought, why are we, going through all these measures in checking in being socially distanced, only to then sit next to, somebody in close quarters? But the question to you is, in your experience in your city, were the measures effective that were implemented in your public transport systems? Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that question. Just like I said in my presentation, that the major reason for venturing into that research is the pursuit that is sent out if the mayors were, effective in terms of compliance by the commuters. But while going to the research, I discovered that to some extent it was effective, but the commuters and the park managers worsened the situation because they were not complying with that preventive measures. And this was as a result of the flaw from, weak public transport governance, that is by the government. It's expected that in all the major parks and then the bus stops, terminals, and the like, people should be placed there that representing the government that will enhance, the implementation of these measures. But it's quite unfortunate that economic factor and some other factors made the commuters and even the owners of these private public transport not to comply at all. So that was the experience. It was to some extent effective, but majority, it was not as it expected to capture and to control the spread of the coronavirus. I think I have answered that question.
Thank you very much. I will then, yes, thank you very much. I will then switch to the Great Lakes region, Malawi, Mtafu Manda. Very interesting perspective, bringing the whole food value chain discussion into inclusive cities. There's a song by one of the famous artists, one line coming from it says, "A hungry man is an angry man." So certainly, as we develop cities, we should ensure that there is food security so as to have a happy and productive populace. Now, my take partly on inclusive cities is that inclusive cities are cities that ensures that all citizens are taken care of. They have opportunities to express their talents, to access transport, economics, education, public services, health services, and the likes. And food is central to human survival. So my question to you is, given your research work in terms of particularly the poor and marginalized population, would you say that the Sustainable Development Goal, the one that specifically speaks to a scenario of zero hunger, do you think they are effective in your setting, just from an overall experience and development perspective? Thanks. Ntafumanda, are you there? Did you get the question?
I'd moved out.
Okay.
I'd moved out, but you can ask the question again.
All right, a quick one. You mentioned in your presentation the need to ensure inclusion of urban poor and marginalized so as to contribute to the drive, Sustainable Development Goal 2, that speaks to achieving zero hunger. My question is, in terms of your experience from the city that you are from, how are we doing in achieving a scenario of having zero hunger?
Thank you very much. We are not doing very well. As a country, Malawi has what they call agriculture input program, which involves distributing a package of fertilizer and improved seed to farmers. But the target is only those farmers in the rural areas. The challenge now is that the divide between rural and urban in Malawi is not clear. And we see a lot of people being left out of that one, and that they are relying on farming, even within the city itself. So that's the problem, and that's why most of the low-income people who are engaged in urban farming are facing serious challenges. So I should say we are not doing very well, and that's why we need some strategies that would target these people who are left out from a big government program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are at a point where we are working towards wrapping the deliberations in this session. I think I will make a last sort of parting shot, and then I'll hand over to the room chair, Mrs. Zaki Mazibuko. I think from me, one of the parting shots would be that I learned a lot, and I appreciate the fact that everybody in this room took time out of their busy schedules to join us in this room. So certainly you made our day as well, and thank you for imparting knowledge that is now to the presenters. And I am of the hope that the participants also derived a lot of knowledge from this session, particularly as it speaks to the focus, which was governance and institutions in promoting inclusivity. The last statement I'll make that emerged from a presentation by Luis Chikova is that inclusivity is a moral obligation and a fundamental requirement for creating sustainable and equitable societies. So I think as we go back to our daily lives, that should be one of our driving points, in terms of the contributions we could make in society to ensure that all voices are heard and nobody is left out of the developmental mainstream activities. Because particularly with South Africa, where it is in terms of a development, we emerge from a number of setbacks, and people have always proven their resilience in terms of overcoming whatever challenges they may face at any particular point. But certainly nobody can go at this city's development alone. It requires an inclusive approach, and it requires that we bring to the fore our ability to work well with others so as to ensure that all citizens of any city, town, or rural area are listened to, their concerns, their material needs, their development aspirations are taken on board in all planning processes, in all government decision processes. And certainly we hope that this session was of great value. Colleagues, that will be from me. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. May I please hand over to the room chair to then close officially. Thank you.
Well summarized, Emmanuel. Probably going before we close the session, there are few questions. In fact, there are more of comments than questions, except the one that says, how does the LV model fit into current urban planning scheme? Can it be implemented by a public sector if the public sector is service-driven rather than profit-driven? I'm not too sure who it was directed to, but if anyone who wants to have a bite in it, I can give that opportunity. In this context, silent does not mean golden. So, but I don't see any reaction from the presenters. And then the last one, I think it was as talking to Umeri Jane, which was while she was defining the rural and made a proposal to say we probably clouded by trying to balance or integrate rural and urban areas. And the question posed here is what defines, in her understanding, what defines rural? And is it by densities or by land use? And how are we supposed to support the highly dense rural areas which require services similar to urban areas? Colleagues, because of time, I don't think we'll be able to deliberate on the two questions, but we would like to have the people that want to, that we're presenting to respond to the charts and then we'll take it. I can see that Samuel wants to have a bite. Someone?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. In terms of the question about what defines either urbanity or rurality, I think the major issue here is about the population. The population is the major determining factor that benchmarks an area either into an urban area or a rural area. And different locations across the world have their own definition when it comes to the subject of urbanity or rurality. Like across Africa, you have some locations where any area, any geographical space with population of 10,000 and above is considered to be rural, to be urban. So what it then means is that any area within that geographical space that is less than 10,000 is considered to be rural. Like what we have in Nigeria, any area with population above 20,000 is considered to be urban. So anything below 20,000 is rural. So the major factor which determines the classification of any area into either urban or rural area is the subject of population. It is after you have met the benchline population that you then begin to talk about, okay, what infrastructure is available to this population that you're talking about. But the first issue to determine whether an area is urban or rural is the subject of population. Thank you.
Okay, I hear you. Someone, any takers? Is an addition or someone who diff?
Say again?
No, I'm asking if there's any addition from other colleagues who are in the group.
Okay, okay.
All right, I think we have come to the conclusion of this. We really appreciate you taking off time at this hour, and you have been a better people to work with, and we encourage that we do meet in the morning to continue with the conference. And as Emmanuel indicated, there's a lot of takers that we still need to take home and deliberate even further. And from what you guys have presented here, we have learned a lot, and we believe that when we do our briefing tomorrow, we will then also get more insight from other groups as well. So for the sake of time, I know we can go on and on, but we would like to call it a day for this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Goodbye.